And welcome back to another cryptical airplane update on my Blaster 2 build. I don't know if this step is actually necessary, but this is something I've seen on RC groups, which is what people are doing is they are putting a little bit of tape around the openings before they cut them. And I think that's just to protect the surface of the glider more than anything. And I figure it's not going to hurt anything. I'm using an automotive masking tape, and then what I'm doing is I'm taking it and folding over a little bit at the end so that I have a little pull tab when it comes time to pull it off, and just being really careful when I put it on. I'm putting it on a little bit over the opening, leaving maybe a 1/16 of an inch or something around the actual opening that's cut out there. Also in the middle of the wing, I pulled the tape back a little bit to expose the center section of the wing, because basically you're going to be cutting servo openings here, and then you're going to be cutting a center section out here. It says to use an X-Acto knife. I'm going to try this. Seems to work just fine. So a straight edge razor will work just fine. Just make sure that it's sharp. These, you buy a box of 100 for like nothing. Use them a couple of times each, and then just go with it. Something that just make sure it's in a comfortable position for you. I know that this probably isn't the best position for you guys as viewers, but I'm just trying to keep it comfortable for me so that I don't mess anything up. Anyway, I'm going to finish cutting these out, and then I'll show you guys the results. Oh, also, I'm going to poke around in this middle section. I don't know if I'm going to use a Dremel to cut that out or what. I'm just going to, once I get these bays open, I'm going to look down in there, see what it looks like. If I need a Dremel, I'll hit it with a Dremel. If I can get away with using a safety razor, then I'll use a safety razor. Okay, welcome back. That was not too hard at all. I do highly recommend using a new razor for each side, because this material is pretty tough. And then when you cut out the center section, it's really kind of rough there. So use a new razor. I would not use an X-Acto knife on this. I might use a Dremel if I was a Dremel professional. But really, I think using this knife was the best, using this razor blade, because what you really don't want to do is punch through and hit the other surface and punch out of the top of the wing. You really don't want to do that. So I think using something without a point on it, and then kind of going from the side and using these really shallow strokes, I think that's kind of the way to go. And you just kind of work your way around. It did not prove too tough. But anyway, yeah, I got through that, and made a nice little opening to pull my servo connector through. I may need, again, I'm using these connectors, so holding these connectors up to it, it looks like that opening is just going to be big enough. So I should be able to terminate the servos under this connector, and then get it in there in such a way that it will stay, and then I can just plug it in from the other side, plug in the other one. Anyway, I'll figure that out when I get to it. But there we go. The wing openings are cut. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I really hate making mistakes, and but I seem to be so good at it. What I did is I cut these completely out, and what I should have done was leave a little lip, just a tiny little fraction of an inch of a lip, so that when you trim this panel is supposed to fit onto there, and it's supposed to be flush when you tape it, so that there's nothing sticking out into the wind. In other words, there needs to be something up here for this to sit on so that you can tape it, so it doesn't, you know, just push through. Now, you can just tape it and put it on there, and it'll probably work. There's a couple of different options, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. I don't know if I'm going to take. I cut some little squares with the intention of trying to glue these squares up here like this, and that would give it a little bit of a lip to rest on. Now I'm thinking that it might be better just to use tape to create a little ledge when I actually put the carbon on. Just let the tape take care of it, and I think that's what I'm going to do. I don't think it's going to set me back too bad. I think it probably would have been nicer if, you know, if everything was all flush the way it's supposed to be, but I don't think it's a requirement, and I don't think it's not going to set me back too bad. But I did want you guys to understand that I made a mistake, and that, you know, if you guys are building, you definitely need to be mindful that you only need to cut, you know, you really only need to cut where your servo is going to be, and even then you really only need to cut just a little bit. You need to leave a little bit of a lip for this hatch to sit on properly. That way you can tape it down and you don't have to worry about trying to futz with it. But, you know, really once this hatch goes on, it's pretty much on there until you need to, you know, until you need to change your servos, or unless you need to change your servos. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm just going to press on with the build and kind of go from there. But I did make a mistake. I just wanted to point it out. The next step involves mounting the servos, but before I can really mount the servos, what I need to do is get together and kind of solder everything in the way that it's supposed to be soldered. I'm going to look at the Spectrum manual and figure out how I'm going to set up my servos, and then look at some wiring diagrams to figure out how I need to solder them, and then I'm going to solder everything up and put everything in. Okay, welcome back. I didn't really want to get into this yet, but I really didn't have much of a choice. At this point, I have to set up my servos and bind my receiver. Couple of things that I did here. I wrapped the servos in tape. Well, I cut the horns off. I wrapped the servos in tape a couple of times, so that way the tape is glued to the wing, and I can just cut the tape and then pull the servo out if I need to later. I put a piece of tape to mark which side of the servo is up, and then I'm going to also write on the piece of tape which wing each one goes in. So this is my right wing, and this is my left wing. I checked out the Spectrum manual. Says the left wing goes to aux 1, the right wing goes to aileron. I taped the servos in place just temporarily so that I could test my servo movement. One gotcha here is when you center your servo horns, you need to go into your flap system menu. There we go. You need to go into your flap system menu, and you need to make sure that all those flap settings are set to 0. All right, so that no matter what the position of your flight position switch is, you don't want any flap mixed in. So if you set all of those numbers to 0, you'll be able to actually center your servos and center your servo horns. The next step is to basically take everything apart and install the servos in the wing, and then solder the connector on. Well, I finally get everything wired in. Basically what I did is I took 2 servos and I connected the positives together and I connected the negatives together, and then I gave each signal wire its own little pin. I ran it into this 4-pin Deans, and then coming out I did the same thing on the other side. Basically common positive, common negative, and separate signals. And that runs to both connectors on the receiver, and then of course I have my little battery pack in there right now, and that's wonderful to see the servos moving. That's always a good point in a project when you get your servos moving